Je m'appelle MC Snow, je suis artiste et j'habite à Ganawagé.
Here we have, as you can see, a pottery called Tell Me a Story by the artist MC Snow, who's a First Nation member. It's made out of epoxy and paint and was made by the artist himself in 2023 and is part of the artist collection. Here's a short video I took of the object that we saw just prior called Tell Me a Story by MC Snow. Here's a short video I took of There's the artifact called Cooking Pot by the artist MC. This is a recreation of an artifact, and in the exhibit you'll see several of these, and it'll be one quote unquote full artifact, and then one to the right is going to be just a small piece, and essentially um, the small piece will be part of the large object. So if you see this exhibit, basically you'll see this full vase, and then next to it will be just a piece of it, like that rim part of it will be presented next to it, right? So you'll have like eight of these artifacts side by side essentially, but the one to the left is the full view or as much of it, and then the one to the right would be just a smaller piece. And then in some of the larger um, artifacts, some of them will have that piece that's to the right missing from it, right? And that's kind of the point of it, is that um, a lot of the times the history that we have of a nation, of a people, of a group, right? Sometimes we have the whole thing, right? We know the whole history. Sometimes we just have pieces, right? So that's the sense that I'm getting from this exhibit, right? But it also could speak on to the mental health and history of the people, right? That sometimes we feel whole, that we feel like we are part as ourself wholly in the nation. Sometimes we just feel like a small little piece, and that we're missing quite a lot, right? So obviously this is something that's subject to interpretation. I'm not telling you that this is what the artist tells you you have to. This is just my personal interpretation of it, right? But it's definitely a very interesting exhibit. And if you are in the city of Montreal and you happen to be near the McCord Museum, please do go see this exhibit for yourself. It's in the museum until mid August. So, August 18th is the end date of this exhibit. So, I highly recommend that you go and see this exhibit for yourself. And please let me know what you guys think, right? I always love hearing other people's opinions and thoughts about an exhibit that I've seen, right? Because obviously I have my personal opinion, and that is the beauty about art, right? Even when the artist is telling you, hey, this is the whole point of it, this is my thoughts, this is why what I created, why I created, etc. This is the whole point of it. You and I might have very different interpretations of it, right? I might agree with the artist, I might disagree with the artist, right? So it's really good. And that's the thing, that's the beauty of art, right? Is that it's a good opportunity to have those discussions and to have those hard truths and the hard talks about, what is the role of your feelings, and how well do you integrate into a society, etc., right? Especially as a First Nation, as an indigenous population, where, especially here in Canada or the US, where most of us, let's be honest, most of us are first, second, or third generation. We can point to somebody who came to the country, right? The first person to come to the country, while as those who are First Nations, who are indigenous, they've been here for so long, they're not pointed to the first person. Oh, yeah, Uncle Bob was the first person to come here, and he's the reason why we're all Canadian or American or whatever, right? most First Nations have been here for so long, for so many centuries, that they don't know who the first person was in Canada, or that part of Canada, or whatever the case might be, right? um and that doesn't make anybody less Canadian or more Canadian, but that's just the reality of it, right? Most of us as Canadians, as Americans, right, most of us came here by choice, right? Or at least a lot of us, right? I'm obviously born Canadian, but you know, somebody somewhere in my family decided, hey, Canada seems like a great country. I'm personally grateful for it. I love being Canadian, and it's not to say Canada is the best. God knows Canada has its issues. Politics, like I always say, is the same everywhere. Politics, let's be honest here, right? If Canadian politics has issues, I don't want to know what it's like in other countries, right? So it's, again, I'm not starting to sound like, oh my God, Canada is perfect. We have our problems, God knows, but I'd rather live in Canada than a lot of other countries, right? But that, again, is just my personal opinion. So if you guys disagree, please let me know in the comments. And in my next part of this video, I will talk more about the artist himself and the art that he works and does. So this is, as you can see, an image of MC Snow, who's the artist of the exhibit that's currently featured at the Recording Museum, from past to present. I'm not finding a whole lot of information about him, to be honest, but I have a funny feeling he's a relatively new artist on the scene. And that's often what happens with a relatively new artist that isn't known internationally. Like if you were to go out and Google search Picasso or Rembrandt, or some such artists, you're gonna find a lot of information because their reputation has been established. They have hundreds and hundreds of artifacts, etc. Right? They've been around for years and years, right? While as MC Snow seems to be relatively recent, right? Everything I'm seeing about him is within the past 5-10 years, right? So if what I talked about, if what I showed is interesting to you guys, if you like what you see of his work, I highly recommend, in order for you guys to know more about him, in order for him to be more established, and for more about him to be out there, I highly recommend that you uh, mention his name to your local museum, right? Whether your museum talks about fine arts or is specifically dedicated to Native American art or First Nation art, or at the very least has part of their goal being, hey, we want to talk about First Nations, we want to talk about Native American or Indigenous peoples. Definitely start saying, hey, I want the works of MC Snow, because obviously with any new artist, word of mouth makes a big difference, right? Picasso didn't become Picasso because he was Picasso. He became Picasso because people were talking about him, right? People went out there and said, hey, there's this new guy that's really interesting. I want to know more about him, right? So, if what I showed you guys about his work is interesting for you, please, by all means, go out there and start saying and start talking about him to your local museums, to your local art gallery, your art dealers, etc. Because that's basically how most artists make a name for themselves, is by word of mouth, is by what we say, right? And that's, like I said, that's just my personal opinion, guys. If you like what I'm talking about, if you like what you're seeing from this artist, by all means, go ahead and do so. I will put a link in the description with my photos that I took from the exhibit, right? And this is an exhibit that I see that was at a different art gallery beforehand as well. So he has had a couple of showings of his work. But again, if you guys want to see his work in your museum or more of his works, you have to talk about it, right? You have to ask about it. It's like any other anything else, any other topic, right? If you want to know more about basketball, well, you have to ask for it. You have to show for it. You have to say, hey, I like basketball. I want to know more about it, right? If you're not talking about it, everybody's just going to be assuming that, well, this is not interesting for you, right? So by all means, guys, if you really like what you see, please by all means go ahead and ask your local gallery or fine arts museum, hey, I really like this artist. Is there any way of getting his work at our at the museum, right? So he is of Mohawk descendants. So um, I'm not going to try to pronounce the original name of the tribe. It does translate to Mohawk in French or English. They're in the Kanawake Reservation here in Quebec, mostly, right? But obviously, like any other Canadian citizens, they don't have to stay at the reservation, but most Mohawk are in that area. It's basically southwest of the island of Montreal. So maybe 20, 30 minutes, you know, driving distance from Montreal, basically. Although it is believed that the Mohawk tribe was on the island of Montreal for quite some time, but for whatever reason did move off island, right? MC Snow does seem to be around 30, 40 years old, give or take. Um, hasn't made any declaration as far as his gender pronouns or his sexuality, so I'm not going to make any assumptions as far as that's concerned. I'll let him speak out on that. But I really like his work because most of his work does seem to be sculpture, so things that basically equate to him working with his hands, which I have to admit I'm always a little bit jealous about, because obviously you do need to not only have thoughts of, hey, I want to make a pot, I want to make a painting, but you actually have to go out there and do it, right? Which does take some time, some effort, and of course a lot of talent. So I am quite jealous that he has all of that together, that he has the talent and patience to sit down and, hey, I want to make a pot out of clay and actually execute that in a beautiful way. And I do like his work. It is not just, hey, this is yet another pot, yet another, clay pot, but it looks very exquisite, very authentic. You get the impression that this is a pot that you would have digged up if this was something that was archaeology, right? So I do like that for this piece of work. So hopefully you guys think the same about his works as I do. But please, if you don't, if you disagree, if you have other opinions, please be respectful. But yes, go ahead and let me know in the description, in the comment section, what you guys think of him. And like I said earlier, guys, if you do like his works and you want to see it in your local museum, by all means shout him out, talk about it, because again, that's how most artists make the careers, is by people asking, talking about it, right? Is by word of mouth. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.